Gemara says that on the ultimate day of judgment, Gentiles that rejected Judaism are going to be confronted with their mistake. And they're going to put in a plea that they want to fulfill a mitzvah, and that the Rebbeinu Shalom God should give them a mitzvah that they can make amends, they can, as it were, correct the failures that had been. Rebbeinu Shalom gives them the mitzvah of Sukkot. And the Gemara continues that they build their sukkahs very gingerly, very quickly, with enthusiasm. And then a very, very blisteringly hot sun comes out. And it's difficult to sit in the sukkah, and they get angry, and they kick the sukkah, and they run away. So they failed. Now the failure isn't that they exited the sukkah, because halachically, the Jew is not just exempt from sitting in a sukkah if it's unpleasant, painful to be there. He's not supposed to sit in the sukkah. But he doesn't kick the sukkah. He doesn't get angry. The Jew always has a contingency plan. There's the preferred plan, the ideal, and then there's a fallback position. Fallback position is you go into the house and eat the Suda there, and you fulfill whatever mitzvahs you can in that more limited context, even if it's sukkahs. The question is, why is sukkah chosen as the arbiter, the litmus test, to differentiate between the Jew and the non-Jew? Okay, one question. Question number 2. Vilna Gaon points out on the Shir Shel Yom, Kapitel and Tilim Ayin Vov, we say on the first day of Sukkot, Vayehi b'shalem Sukkah menosoi b'tzion. There's a comparison suggested by the psalmist between Sukkah and Eretz Yisrael. The Gur says those are two mitzvahs that one enters into with one's entire body. We're enveloped in the mitzvah. We're totally covered by the mitzvah. Question is often asked, what about mikveh? But mikveh is different, because mikveh, there's no significance, no mitzvah for extending the duration of the time in the mikveh. Mikveh is a facilitator of taiva. One is in and out. You might see certain fellows in the mikveh that stick it out a long time, but not necessarily because there's a halachic prescription to do so. So, Sukkah and Eretz Yisrael, the duration, being there, you're fulfilling a mitzvah. And every facet, every aspect of your being, eating, sleeping, everything should be in the Sukkah. There are positions that hold that you need a really justifiable excuse to exit the Sukkah during the course of Sukkot. Totally contains you. So what's this relationship between Sukkah and Eretz Yisrael? Okay, let's step back a moment. Judaism is unique. Halachic Judaism is unique in that it's identical with nationhood. There's no other religion that there's an exact congruency between the religion and its nationality. Other religions, lahavdil, have holy places, but one can live one place and visit that holy place with a certain degree of frequency. Here, there's it's exactly synonymous. The nation and the religion. There's something about Judaism that requires being in Eretz Yisrael for its ideal fulfillment. Once again, there's a contingency plan. There's a game plan for Golus, for exile, for diaspora. There's a strategy on how to survive and what we have to do. But it's on hold. We're waiting to get back to Eretz Yisrael. We're waiting to come to Eretz Yisrael to fulfill the mitzvahs, and the primary mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael, living in Eretz Yisrael. There was a time when the Zionist movement first began that the popular definition of a Zionist is when one fellow asks a second fellow for money so that a third fellow can live in Israel. Interestingly enough, it's not so far-fetched, because there are poskim that hold that you do partake of the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael by supporting somebody living in Eretz Yisrael. And interesting halachic ramifications. The Pas HaShulchan, when the Talmidei Agro says in the Schiller about giving priority to your local needs, somebody that lives in Oshkosh and he's giving tzedakah, he has a priority responsibility to give locally. But Pas HaShulchan and others hold that this other factor kicks in. Eretz Yisrael becomes competitive because you can't fulfill the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael by supporting somebody to live in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Why would it be so that the Rebbeinu Shalom designed Torah, the Jewish people, to have this spiritual chemistry that the Jew needs Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael needs the Jew? Remember, in the Teichacha it says that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to keep the land desolate for those who try and make it work during the absence of the Jews. Those of us who were here after the 67 war and before the 67 war remember how blatantly evident it was which parts of the land had been in Jewish hands and which had not been in Jewish hands. It had been cultivated, it had been attended to. The Ramban says that that's a posuk of Nechoma in the middle of the Teichor, Vashimoisi ani es ha'oretz lifnei oyevechem hayoshvim bo, that sit there, that are settling there. It won't work for them. And when the secular Zionist movement leadership was prepared to consider Uganda as an alternative for the halachic Jew, it was obvious a non-starter. Again, we do have a plan for living in Golus, but we can't substitute the ultimate goal of coming back to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding Eretz Yisrael. So why do we need a land? It's not accidental. First thing Yehoshua does when he comes into the land is he legislates urban law dictating what can be grown within the boundaries of the city, what can't be. When the Jew is outside of Eretz Yisrael, and when I talk about Eretz Yisrael, I mean Eretz Yisrael with the Beis Mikdash, with the Sanhedrin, and there's a golus in Eretz Yisrael when we don't have a Beis Mikdash and a Sanhedrin. The golus of the Yevonim, of the Greeks, was here. When the Jew is outside of Eretz Yisrael, or outside of the halachic fulfillment of the Beis Mikdash relationship, he's then under a certain responsibility to a secular law, a civil law, that governs him as well. In a sense, he's experiencing a certain spiritual schizophrenia. There are two reshuyot, there are two authorities that he's responsible to. So the halacha teaches us, again, we fall back, we go into halacha, every contingency. What do? If it's a just government, where you are in Golus, you have a responsibility to fulfill that law, if it's reasonably just. Where it's not, so then the issue becomes Chilul Hashem, and there are other ramifications. But essentially, there's a split, there's a duality. He's under the halachic law, and he's under that other law. Only when the Jew is in Eretz Yisrael, and there's an exact congruency between his daily, routine activity that would normally be considered under civil law and his religious activity, only then is he living a comprehensive and complete existence as a Jew. And that could not have been done in Uganda because there's a spiritual chemistry between this space and the Jewish neshama. Trumas, Maisras, the Yisras to speak Lashon Hara, it's here. It's this space. There's a reality to it. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom sprinkles clues in history, and we have to play Sherlock Holmes and pick up on the clues. But in fact, there is no other nation that was divorced from its geographic space for a few thousand years and in fact came back. Never happened anywhere else, or to anyone else. Lucky? Could be. Improbable. When you couple it with all of the nevuos and the thrust of Jewish life throughout the few thousand years that we were divorced from this land, there was a yearning to come back here. And a conviction that it's ultimately going to happen. Be'ita achishen, it'll either happen at its outermost date, or I can participate in helping make it come earlier. Okay, so that's why we need Eretz Yisrael. Only when we have a land can we have a totality of every facet of our existence being under the rubric of the Rebbeinu Shalom's will. Admittedly, we said there is a strategy for how to deal with Golus, but it's a b'diavad. It's not the ideal. And we're missing dimensions. The Torah Jew, when he had his Beis Mikdash up, accepted sacrifices from the Gentile communities around Eretz Yisrael. They understood, they sensed, there was the aura and the success of the community spiritually. Man, God, man, man was a magnet, and they sent sacrifices. Says the Gemara, whenever the Gentiles sent sacrifices to the Beis Mikdash, it had to be treated as a korban olah. Primary difference between an olah and a shlomim is that an olah is completely consumed on the mizbeach. Kulo kolim. Shlomim part gets eaten. And the Gemara doesn't submit scriptural derivation in order to extract this law. It says, you know why that's true? Because it's a self-evident proposition. That's the psyche, the nature of the non-Jewish mentality. Either you're engaged in spirituality or you're engaged in the physical universe. The two are mutually exclusive. So if you want to send a sacrifice, it has to be an olah. The Torah Jew says, no, it's not the way it is. That eating can be sanctified. There are certain spiritual levels that can only be accessed through certain physical experiences. You have to see, touch, feel, taste. Why is it so? Because that's the nature of the way the Rebbeinu Shem created us, is to utilize the physical universe as a resource for accessing spirituality. Everything in the Bria, Hakol Bo Lechvoide, everything in the Bria, in creation, is there as a potential resource and has spiritual energy in it. And if we use the halachic code, we unlock the spiritual energy within that peach when we make the blessing and taste the peach. Chazal say that seems to be a contradiction. One verse says the earth has been given to man. Another place it says that it's all the Rebbeinu Shalom still. And the resolution is before the bracha or after the bracha. Once you recite the bracha, you've earned the right to participate in that experience, which now, because you've given it a direction, you've guided the experience, that is not a random experience, it's not casual, it's a focused experience that now helps you access the spirituality that resides within that experience. What is it? At least partially, it's the consciousness of this fascinating relationship between the juices and the peach, their sweetness as I experience them, my taste buds, the enzymes, all interacting and sending that message to my brain to deliver that pleasure. That's a facilitator of understanding the complexity of this creation called the peach and this creation called man, and the Rebbeinu Shalom's chesed, kindness, in delivering nourishment in such a fashion. Didn't have to be that way. Everything could have tasted like castor oil. So, the physical universe, for the Jew, is Hakol Bara L'Chvoide. It's a resource. Only when I'm in Eretz Yisrael can I guide, focus every facet of the total experience of the nation and the individual towards fulfilling that mandate. Another way of putting it might be like this. People are accustomed to listening to radio programs, television programs, and every once in a while a commercial pops up. What can you do? That's the sponsor. So you have to hold your breath a bit and tolerate the commercial until the program goes back on. But you're not interested in the commercial. The non-Jew relates to spirituality as a commercial on the program of life. They have to put up with it, tolerate it for a certain amount of time. But let's get back to the program. The Torah Jew says every facet of existence is the message. There was one famous movie producer who was criticized that his films didn't have any message. This was 80 years ago. And his response was, when I want to send a message, I use Western Union. The Jews say everything has a message. Every experience potentially has that message. Chazal say if somebody comes across an orchard, let's say it's hefker, obviously. Doesn't belong to anybody, and there's a new fruit that you never tasted. If you don't taste it, you're going to have to give an accounting for it. Because it's another experience, it's another angle of perception. It's another empirical road to get to this relationship between myself and my Creator, and the magnificence of this interaction. Sukkah is again this message. You enter in with your entire being to Eretz Yisrael and to the Sukkah. Everything you do there partakes of spirituality. Pasuk in Bolok. Bolok summons Bilam to come as a hired hand to deal with the Jews. He said, Am yotzam mitzrayim v'chisas ein ha'oretz. Simple readers, they covered the land, the visibility of the land. There's so many of them. This Sfas Emes says they changed what he was complaining about. They changed our relationship to the material world. They now are urging, demanding, challenging that the physical universe has to be utilized for spirituality. And we can't enjoy it randomly, recklessly, as we did in the past. It has to be accounted for. It has to be focused. That's irritating. That's frustrating. That changes, it's a game changer. So Sukkah and Eretz Yisrael both have that as a theme. The entirety, completeness, hakol bo lechvoidei, entering in with your whole body. The body is a resource. Chazon Ish was often quoted as having said, he was both often quoted and quoted as having often said. Both are true. That a Jew has to learn to live with contradictions. Our existence on this planet is replete with paradoxes. We have to learn how to deal with those paradoxes. He submitted as evidence that a Navi, in order to be eligible, we're taught for Nevuah, must be besimcha. He has to be in a state of joy. That means that Yirmiyahu Novi, when he authored Eicha, Lamentations, he was besimcha. How's that possible? A Jew has to learn to handle, to juggle, to deal with contradictions. I'd like to suggest the source of that axiom. There's a machlekes, the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, on the bracha that you recite when a Jew's bodily functions work well. Ashiyotza, and mafli lasait. What an awesome creation, this the way it operates, the way it's designed. The Beis Yosef says straightforward, it's the grandeur of this intricate machine called the human body. So magnificently designed. The Ramah says it's the improbability of joining two discrete, two separate worlds of existence. The angel and the animal. Angels are spiritual, they're otherworldly. Animals are purely, exclusively physical. And now the Rebbeinu Shem has created a man, Odom, and he's joined the angel with the animal. How could that be? Mafli lasas. And the neshama resides in this body and has to sort out how to guide the body. But since they're both designed from Torah as the blueprint, it can be done. And it's mafli lasas, and that's the challenge of the Jew. So there's something here in Eretz Yisrael, in Sukkot, that goes in direct counter-distinction to the mentality of the non-Jew. Commercial on the program of life, we can tolerate, but not a comprehensive approach that hakol bara lechvoidei. About 35 years ago, we had a visit from the Director General of the Jewish Agency, who was a bit impressed with the numbers of students that had come from good universities and stayed at Or Sameach. They had a program then subsidizing foreign students. And this Director General who came to visit himself had been from family. He had bolted and become secular. So he was very intrigued by this. He interviewed the students. The first fellow, he asked, why did you learn here? Why did you stay to learn? He said, well, the academic level, the fellow studied in Stanford in California, was then rated on par with Harvard, or maybe a little better. So in the academic, the challenge intellectually was as great or greater. He asked the second fellow, he said, he never saw a community that was so giving, such chesed. He came from a suburb of Chicago, I believe it was Buffalo Grove. People have very, very spacious, commodious homes. Very, very rare did you see people having guests. Here people have dinky little apartments and they're always piling in guests. The amount of gemachim, free loan societies, not just money, interest-free, but you can borrow furniture, clothes, utensils, you name it. There are a few thousand different free loan societies in Yerushalayim, and it's true of every from community, but what's ever true elsewhere is more true here. He asked the third fellow, "Why did you stay?" Fellow, without missing a beat, I remember who he was, he's a teacher out today in LA. I said, "I'll tell you the truth. We went out to play baseball Erev Shabbos, and these rabbis, the whole week, they learn and they teach, and they came out once a week, and they played so darn well, I figured there must be something mystical to this stuff." So this fellow, Rivlin, turns to me and says, "Ha'im zeh mutar leRosh Yeshiva lesachek baseball? Is it acceptable for Rosh Yeshiva to play baseball?" I thought, only if he plays well. Everything, hakol bara lechvoidei. Eis lakol, we read today in Koheles. That there's timing. We're built in such a manner, we need a break. We need exercise. Fine, but what are the criteria that you're using for how much, when, where, and with whom? Every facet of human existence, that's the message of Sukkot. We're soon going to read, Rashi tells us that we start with Bereshis in Torah in order to establish that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world. He made the shidduch between which nation gets which space, and he gave Eretz Yisrael to us. Of course, it's fascinating that we didn't get this schus until the nations that formerly were there, preceding our getting there, because we made some stops along the way, until they forfeited their right to be there. Pasuk again emphasizes that. Until they forfeited their right. Because this land is a unique land, it's a spiritual land, it has an allergy to Averis. And therefore, shocks them out. When the scouts do their first tour and they come back and give a negative report about Eretz Yisrael, they say it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. Rabbi Tzadok says that pasuk and other seemingly negative statements can be turned on their heads and have a positive potential interpretation as well. He said there's no other land that digests its inhabitants. This land, because of this spiritual chemistry between the Jew and the land, it ingests and digests the Jew when he's living according to the fulfillment of his potential as a halachically fulfilled part of a nation that has a destiny and a message. They have to live out the drama of that message. We don't preach to the world, we demonstrate. We create that working society, nation, individual, communities, that becomes then a spiritual magnet. The ultimate goal, impact the world. But ideally, it should be through us putting our house in order and demonstrating it. The Ramban already points out that Avraham and Yitzchak proselytized to the universal community. Yaakov, you don't find that. After Yaakov establishes the Shiftei Kor, now he worked from within the family of this nation. It's an extended family. And they create the living, working model. And that then will bring about the ultimate tikkun ha'olam. So Sukkah, it's not accidental that Sukkah was the mitzvah that was given to the non-Jews as the arbeiter, the test. They didn't do well. And it's not accidental that we're still having difficulty making our case that this is where we belong and it belongs to us. The world has a problem with it because it runs exactly counter to everything that they have thought and lived by. And the Machlekes, the Rishonim, it goes back earlier, and the last Golus, will it be entirely Esav? Will it be entirely Yishmael? Or will it be a combination of the two? And in fact, that's where we seem to be living today. So, Sukkot, Mepharshim talk about part of the message of Sukkah is the projection to the world of Am Yisrael's mission, its mission statement, that the material world is a resource, it's not an end in itself. That's one of the terutzim that can be given to the Tuas Kasha, why we don't do Sukkot right after Pesach in the month of Nisan when they came out of Mitzrayim. Is we wanted to call attention that we're doing it at a time that doesn't necessarily fit the chronology historically, but suits the goal of the mitzvah is to project and to make a statement to the world. So, Eretz Yisrael is one big sukkah, and each sukkah that each Jew builds is a little piece. It's an embassy of Eretz Yisrael. It's living out the drama of that theme that it's a resource. And it's here for us to maximize the potential to bring it to fruition. A good night.